In what world do you think you understand what's going on?
I just find that to be infuriating and not helpful.
Put your pound of flesh on the line like you actually are with them.
The mothers there crying their eyes out because they're taking their son.
Get over there and do something about it. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Extraordinary Family Life podcast. We're your hosts, Greg and Rachel Denning. In this podcast, the Extraordinary Family Life website, all of our resources, all of our tools exist to help you create your unique, extraordinary family life. That's what it's all for. That's what we live for and get excited about. That's what we work for. We want you to have an amazing family life that's on your terms, and it's happy and joyful and healthy and wealthy and seriously awesome, so that during your life you love it, and at the end of your life you look back and be like, that was amazing.
And you're starting with that, I'm assuming, because we had a conversation, wondering if discussing this topic today fits into that framework.
And yes,
The point of our podcast is to help families live an extraordinary family life. So should we be talking about Trump and Zelensky?
And all kinds of other stuff. And
yes,
it fits in, because we even, had a discussion around it this morning for our family devotional with our kids, who are, the ones that are with us now are from 19 down to 8. And we had
varying levels of interest in the discussion
and understanding, but we're trying to talk about world events and what's going on. And the way we talk about it with our children and with each other is important. The way we engage on social media or with our friends is important. I guess I'll start it off with a story. This morning, I had a good friend of mine. He's an older gentleman who's just a great human being. He's from South Africa and went through all the turmoil there that happened for all the decades of his life. And then he moved to Sweden and lived there for several years. He has a home in Germany and now a home here in Portugal. He was in the military and all kinds of different things in business. So he's had a lot of experience on this side of the planet, 2 continents. And he called me this morning. We were talking, and he's like, hey, before I let you go.
He was hiring our boys to do some work.
Yeah, he wanted to do some work. He said, before I let you go, what do you think about what happened in the White House last week between Trump and Zelensky? And he wanted to get my opinion. He said, I'm asking people what they think, especially Americans, what do you think? And of course, and we're going to talk about this today. My answer was like, well, I don't know. It was pretty dramatic and pretty theatrical. I think it could have been handled more as gentlemen and, a little more class, a little more diplomacy. But then even in saying that, I'm not ignorant to the fact that some discussions get ugly, and they have to. And when you're dealing with big issues, there has to be some
conflict.
There has to be. Even in marriage, there has to be conflict. In parenting, there's going to be some conflict. That's a natural part of it. And when you have cameras on you and the whole world is watching and massive things are at stake, it's really easy for us to sit in our little chairs and pass judgments about how clear things are to us.
Right.
And so, of course, I was like, well, I can't really opine on it because I'm not an expert in Ukrainian history, nor an expert in U.S. history.
Right.
Even though I, spent 40 years there and have studied U.S. history and studied world history. There's so much depth behind everything that's going on that it would be embarrassingly ignorant and arrogant of me to think I have a very clear opinion about what's actually happening.
Well, I think that this is especially relatable to the podcast episode we recently did a few weeks ago about certainty. Like, is certainty a sin? Was kind of the whole, because that came from a movie, and that was kind of the title of the podcast. Because we've had people say to us, like, gosh, you guys are so certain about the things you talk about on your podcast. Like, how can you say so boldly, this is how it is, or this is what it's like? And as we explained in that episode, well, that's the point of our podcast. We're talking about the things we do know a lot about. We're talking about the things we have studied for decades.
And experimented with.
And
well, with ourselves and many
and our clients, right? So we're talking about the things we know about. So that's why we have boldness. That's why we have certainty in those topics. Now here today, and we mentioned then, we don't usually talk about this kind of stuff because we don't know. We're not experts in geopolitics or European government or whatever. Like all of these things we are not experts in. And so we don't speak boldly about it. But what we did want to talk about today was the irony that we find of people who also are not experts on these topics and yet are declaring boldly their perspectives on Facebook as though they know what they see, that they know how it should be viewed because of their very limited perspective. I just find that to be, one, infuriating, and two, not helpful in any way.
And honestly, kind of embarrassing and shameful. And it's a slap in the face when you thought, like, wait a minute, how can we declare with a little Facebook post that this is who Trump is, or this is who Zelensky is, or this is what should be happening? Like,
or this is who we should be supporting, or this is what should be happening.
Right.
This is, if this is happening, it means this.
That's crazy to me. And when I hear people make those statements, or I see them make those statements, I think, are you kidding me?
Mm-hmm.
Like, in what world do you think you understand what's going on?
Right.
Because Rachel and I always say this, that there's two sides to every story and then the truth.
Mm-hmm.
But with something like this, there's 100 or 1,000 sides to this story and then the truth.
Right.
And if anybody can actually get to the truth of something that's so complex and so complicated, it would be a miracle. There's so much going on here that we cannot understand. So to boldly make these declarative statements
mm-hmm.
is absurdly ignorant and arrogant.
Well, it's very myopic. You're literally not taking in the full perspective, especially when you start to dig even a little bit. Okay, that's you and me knowing practically nothing about this and digging a little bit, and we're able to find out things like, well, actually, this conflict has been going on for 34 years.
Or more.
At least.
Yeah.
More, considering the fact that America is so young, they don't realize. I mean, I remember when we first came to Europe, we moved to a town in now what is Germany. The town was 700 years old.
900. It was celebrating its 900th birthday.
Old.
But that's important because it wasn't even Germany for 900 years. It had changed countries or nationalities or kingdoms so many times in that period. But the city had existed. It was founded and gone through all those countries. Well, and you and I were reading part of our morning devotional with our kids. We're reading through this series of books called the Story of the World. And right now we're reading about these conflicts and these changes in borders and control and nations and
we read about the 30 Years War in Europe, which actually lasted for 41 years, not 30 years.
But my point is that part of the world, Ukraine and Russia and that whole area, that has changed hands so many times. There's been ongoing conflicts for centuries, if not millennium.
Exactly.
That we're not even aware of. And there's cultural things and deep heritage. It's all there. And we're on the other side of the world.
Right. On our social media.
Social media and this is how things ought to be.
And making a judgment based off of our awareness of the issue for the past 2 to 3 years from when the Ukraine war started, when really it's connected to a conflict that has been going on much longer than that.
Right.
So to think that we can understand and make some declarative statement about this is how it should be, this is who we should be supporting, this is what it's about, unless you have literally been studying it your entire life, I don't think you can make a statement like that. So that's what frustrates me, and that's kind of what we want to talk about today is like, hey, people, let's be more careful with our words. Let's be more open to possibilities and more understanding and not be so bold in our political statements, because all it ultimately does when we do that is cause division and divisiveness. And that, hands down, is going to be a bigger problem for America or any nation than your opinion
about what? what should be
correct
done.
opinion is. Exactly.
What I love and admire so much about people who really do know their stuff, who've studied and paid a price to earn an opinion.
Mm-hmm.
They're rarely very declarative like that. They'll come forward and it's like, well, it's actually a pretty complex issue, and it takes a lot to understand what's going on here. And
Yeah,
why. And
both sides are to blame. They both contributed to the problem. Just like when you're parenting your children, the best parenting strategy doesn't come in and say you're right and you're wrong. It recognizes that both children have contributed to the issue.
Right.
And so both children need to be disciplined in order to actually resolve the issue.
And it's foolish to go in and say one is right and one is wrong, or one is good and one is bad. And the same thing in this case. You paint one as the hero and the other as the villain.
Which we've literally seen Facebook posts saying, Zelensky, hero. I don't know. I don't know that. I don't hardly know a thing about Zelensky. Right. I've only known he existed for the past 3 years. So how can I make a declarative statement about him as a person and his character when I don't know him at all?
And in fact, we see that come out with our own neighbors or even extended family members. We think we know them, and then this happens all the time. You find out, that he's actually a crook. He's been,
cheating on his wife all this
cheating
time.
on his wife for all these years, or he's been sexually abusing children. This happens all the time, like in a church congregation or whatever.
In Tennessee, that soccer coach that was literally
for years and years and years
sexually abusing. He was this hero in the community, and all the time he'd been
him with their kids, and for years he was sexually abusing these little boys on his soccer team,
and had video of it.
Community trusted him. They thought they knew him. They thought he's a great guy, and it was this horrible. You find those things out, and you're like, I thought I knew them. You don't even know your own neighbors like you think you do. In fact, let's be honest, most people don't even understand themselves very well, and yet somehow they know Zelensky is this way, or Trump is that way, or Putin's this way. Like, now, obviously, there are some telltale signs. There are some declarative things. There's things out there. With Putin, you can read about some of his things and what he's done. You're like, okay, there's some real darkness there, right? And it can become obvious. But I guess,
and of course, people would say the other side with Trump as well. Like, there's things there. Okay,
there's some dark things. Absolutely, yeah. And so, I guess what I'm saying is, like, we want to deify or turn people
vilify.
We want to vilify some and turn others into the heroes. And we just want to see things in so black and white.
Exactly.
It's really naive. It's very childish to think, well, no, this is so blatantly obvious to me.
Right.
Black and white, good and evil, and that's it. And I'm gonna post something. I'm gonna put a little flag on my social media account, and that's that. I'm there.
Profile picture. Okay, let's talk about that for a second, because literally that drives me crazy, and it's been going on for several years or even more now. It's so stupid. Changing your profile picture on Facebook does nothing.
Yeah.
It does nothing. If you really want to support a cause, well, go out and support the freaking cause.
Right.
Don't change your stupid profile picture. It's so stupid.
And
it's like this just follow the masses types thing. And you know what you say about that? Like, usually with masses, the M is silent, right? Stop following the asses. Like, why? It's so stupid to me.
And people do it because we want to feel like we're doing something good. We want to feel like we're
supporting the underdog,
right? Or on the right side, of an issue or history. And I think we all we need to call this out so that we put away this absurdity that somehow being an activist actually does something. It really doesn't. It doesn't do anything except maybe make you feel good about yourself, because you probably hate yourself for all the other stupid things you do, like your horrible habits at home, you yelling at your
broken relationship,
your totally dysfunctional life. But wow, you're an activist for something you literally know nothing about and aren't willing to do anything about. I just want to call people out. Like, when they throw this up on, they change their profile picture and it says, I'm with them. I'm like, great. When are you going over there? And which battlefront are you going to be on? Well, no, I'm not going. Oh, no, blah, blah.
Then you don't really support them.
You don't do anything. Like if you support something, ooh, this makes me want to swear. Get over there and do something about it, right? And now to not sound like hypocrites ourselves, I am adamantly against human trafficking. And so I went into one of the darkest hellholes on the planet to try to help out, right? Paid my way, went in,
but
I did something.
You should have just changed your profile
and be like, I'm against this.
I'm against. I support anti-human trafficking.
When there's been horrendous, disasters, and I've been able to go, like, I don't change my profile. Like,
I support Cuba.
I'm with Cuba. Got on an airplane. I went to Cuba. I did it in Honduras. I've done it around the globe. If you're going to support something, get yourself over there and support it for reals. Like, get dirty and tired and hungry and thirsty and exhausted. Put your pound of flesh on the line, like you actually are with them. Your pathetic little, change your profile thing literally does nothing. It does nothing. And you might think, well, I'll just send some money. Yeah, who knows where that money goes?
Yeah, exactly.
If we're naive enough to think that money actually lands where it's supposed to, I have a bridge to sell you.
Yeah.
Somewhere. I have some oceanfront property in Kansas. I'd really like to sell you. Like, no way. Like we've got to educate ourselves so much more. And if you just all of us, if we just pursue education, we very quickly find
things are more complex.
They're way more complicated than we thought. And it's not black and white. And I can't understand it from reading one article.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't. And 4 on the same side or 4 on the other side. Like, I have to start understanding the issue from different angles and see the whole thing. And then, after decades, I think I have a little glimpse now. And even if you've been there, I have friends who went and spent months in Ukraine when the war started, and they saw the devastation, they saw the destruction. So they have a clearer view of what happened, which is powerful. And so they earned an opinion on that thing. But even being there and seeing the bombed out areas and the families and houses and lives that were destroyed, that still doesn't give them insight into what's happening behind closed doors, government officials.
Yeah.
We still don't know.
And what you and I love to talk about is the levels of thinking. There's first level thinking, second level thinking, third level thinking. Like, that's just the first level of thinking.
Is what you observe.
And even digging into that there is still first level, because then it's like, okay, what are the second level, third level, fourth level consequences of this issue? And one of the things that people do not fully realize is that no matter the issue, whether it's open borders at the U.S. or it's the Ukraine-Russia war, behind the scenes is the human trafficking that's occurring simply because the borders are open or simply because the war is happening. And, especially with the friends that that went, that's what they were dealing with, was the human trafficking that's occurring simply because there's a war. There are, what was the numbers? Like hundreds of thousands of children that have just disappeared?
The estimates were a few 100,000 children that disappeared into trafficking just because the conflict created so much chaos.
Right.
It was easy for predators to just grab people.
Exactly. And I've also been seeing videos. So again, another consequence, videos of, you and I have personally met people from Ukraine as we've traveled through Europe and as we're living in Portugal.
We heard their stories.
We've heard their
stories that were just devastating.
Very sad stories. But we've seen the videos of government officials or I guess military essentially in the Ukraine on the streets, kidnapping young men, anyone of fighting age, to enlist in the army. So that they can keep fighting the war.
We were all made aware of that at the very beginning, that any military age man was not allowed.
People who told us, like, this one woman, she was our waitress in Poland, and she said that her parents were still there because her dad was not allowed to leave, because no men are allowed to leave. They had very little power or electricity.
He was probably in his 50s at least.
And still couldn't leave. her mother stayed there with her because she's like, I'm not leaving my husband.
Yeah.
But they only had power like on the weekends. I don't know, something weird like that. Like it was really rough conditions that they were living in. And here she was working in Poland, just trying to survive and just, sad and separated from her family. But now, and again, I don't know if this has been going on the whole time or if it's just happening now or it did happen before, but they're taking them off the streets and like, these are videos of them wrestling and the mothers there crying their eyes out because they're taking their son to go fight in this war. And I don't know all the details, but we should be so hesitant to say, I support Ukraine when we don't know what's going on behind the scenes.
Right.
Because why should that mother have to lose her child to this war because Americans support Ukraine or whatever? You know what I'm saying? It's all connected. We don't know. So we should be dang careful about what we say we support.
Right.
I don't know if I support that.
Are you willing to send your child over?
Yeah.
When you change your little, you change your little profile picture, you ready to send your kids?
Right. Well, that's the other thing, because if supporting Ukraine means World War III, no, thank you. I am out. I am not willing to have another world war just because we want to support Ukraine. And like we said, I don't know that much about it, but from what I do know, one of the reasons Zelensky wants, and that perhaps one of the reasons he brought up the whole little thing that occurred in the argument was he wants America to support him getting into NATO. And if Ukraine gets into NATO, first of all, that's a big deal because years and years and years ago, Russia and Ukraine signed a thing that said Ukraine promised they would never get into NATO. That was part of the agreement. But if Ukraine gets into NATO, America and Europe have to support them.
All the NATO allies.
Right. All the allies have to support them against Russia. Of course, Russia's going to have help from China. Here we are, World War III.
So, no, but and yeah, those are potential things that could happen. But I guess that's an interesting point to just kind of think about and discuss. Like, what are the unintended consequences and second and third and fourth and fifth level consequences? Because we might look at an issue right now and think, man, this is so black and white right here. Like, this needs to be done. And we haven't earned the experience and wisdom to say, what will be this ripple effect that creates that ripple effect that could potentially lead to another world war in this example. And so it's so easy for us to think, no, you should do that, because we're not thinking, well, wait a minute, if they do this thing that at the front seems good, but in the back leads to millions of deaths, would you still advocate that?
Right.
And that's the next layer and level of thinking that this fits in every aspect of life.
Right.
Even parenting right now. Parenting, they'll use this good strategy of like, well, I'm just going to do this and make my kids do it. And then you get that immediate result and you think, it worked. Without realizing that if you do that over the long term, you will have zero relationship with your kid moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Well, and then on the flip side of what you're talking about, these are the questions I ask myself. I don't know. But from the outside, everyone's saying Trump is siding with Putin, which means that is bad, which means
everyone is saying some loud people are
saying
like that, using very dramatic terms.
Trump is siding with Putin, which means that's a bad thing, which means he's not on the side of democracy, which means we need to support Ukraine. That's the level of thinking. That's the reasoning. That doesn't make sense to me. Because just because that may look like what he's doing from my perspective doesn't mean that's what's happening. I cannot presume to know that. You and I, we were just talking about it. We have this funny little joke that when we were first married, you were a teacher. And I was very young looking, like I looked like a teenager. And you were standing very close to me because I was at school.
I had my arm.
Oh, yeah. You had your arm around me. And one of your bosses was down the hall and saw me. And we saw that look in his eye where he was like, have your arm around a student.
Yeah, he was livid.
He comes storming down the hallway, just like ready to rip you to shreds.
And fire me on.
And you're like, yeah. And you're like, oh, hey, meet my wife. Oh, this is your wife,
And he said that. He's like, I thought you had your arm around a student, and he was still all fired up.
Yeah.
Like, dude, come on. And that's where, like, jumping to conclusions and making assumptions, we get ourselves in a lot of trouble.
Right. So, like, yeah,
Well, and I guess
that people are saying, oh, he's siding with Trump or with Putin. That's bad. Okay, I could understand that. But I don't know if that is actually bad. Because what if what we need to prevent World War III is for him to look like he's siding with Putin, or at the very least, not being a jerk to this guy, knowing that he's not going to be able to prevent World War III if he's just a jerk to him.
it's crazy. Yeah. Well, again, we don't know exactly. There's so much we don't know. I think it's a good, healthy thing for all of us listening here, and for me and for Rachel, most of all, to just our first mental reaction should be, I wonder if there's more to this that I don't understand.
Exactly.
And we learned that the hard way, because you and I have made assumptions, and we had rash opinions, and we jumped to the island of conclusions all the time. And we just made complete fools of ourselves so many times. And it was embarrassing. It's painful. And you look back, you're like, but it seemed so obvious.
Right.
It seemed so clear. Yeah, I was so sure. I'm so certain. I could see what it was. And then you find out more details, and you're like, yowzers.
Mouth in foot.
No, foot in mouth. And your mouth in your foot. It was so bad. And even there were times when you saw somebody do something, and you were right in the assessment of the thing they did. But then you hear their life story, and you stop and you go, okay, now I know why they did it.
Right.
And it changes my whole paradigm. That happened to me so many times, countless times. And
knowing that story, you're like, oh, now I know why they did that, and I would have done the same thing.
Right. If I were in their shoes, I'm sure I would have done the same thing.
But you have to have the whole story to understand that.
I'm going to retell a story now that I learned years ago. I've told it other places, but I'll retell it now. We met with one of the owners of a national soccer team as we were traveling the world. And this is what's cool. So, we've traveled to dozens of countries together extensively. And when you go to different countries, as long as you have like an open mind and open eyes, and you're not just blind and ignorant. When we first started traveling, we were like, America's the best. Why isn't this more like America? Why don't they do things like Americans do? And then you realize, oh, there's ways, so many different ways to do things, and we can learn from everyone. So traveling is very expansive. It opens your head and your mind.
Expansive and expensive.
And and it's all those good things. But you can learn so much if you're open to it.
Mm-hmm.
So we're traveling in one of these countries. There's a very famous national soccer team, and they had one of the best players in the world on their team. And they traded him away. The fans were irate. Like, they went bonkers. Like, why in the world would the managers, the owners, the other teammates, why would anyone tolerate trading your best player? Mm-hmm. Like, what is wrong with you people? And there was this uproar. It was insane. And everyone watching on, they just thought they saw it clearly. You'd have to be the dumbest owners and managers in the world to trade away your best player.
Right.
Like, you're so ignorant. And of course, you know, from the outside, the fans think they see it clearly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what they could not tell anyone was why they did it. They couldn't reveal it. They couldn't make it public, and they never would, and they never have. But I was meeting with the owners, and like, yeah, this guy pulled out a pistol, a firearm in the locker room, and was waving around in the face of the other players and the team and the managers, threatening it with a firearm. He pulls out a handgun in the locker room, pointing at people. Yeah, that guy's out of here. But they could never make it public. Mm. And so all the fans always just think, you're the biggest idiots. I see clearly he's the best player in the world, and you just traded him. You're just a bunch of blah, blah, blah. Like, you have no idea what's going on.
Yep.
You don't know. And so it's better to keep your mouth shut and think, I wonder. Because clearly what I do see is that guy is one of the best players, and they traded him. It seems like, to me, a really dumb decision for the team. I wonder if there's something else that happened that I don't know about, that I can't know about, that justified that decision.
Right.
And that, man, that was so instructional for me, that experience, and many others like that. Think, I don't know what's going on, and to pretend that I do, it makes me look like an idiot.
Right.
And this is true across the board.
Well, and I think that's the point of this conversation, really, is like, stop looking like an idiot.
Right.
You don't know what's going on. And so it's okay to have conversations and discuss and ask questions, but it should be from an open mind, a place of like curiosity, rather than this is what's happening. And how could he dare do that? And Trump is just a bully and this and that and like all these things. I don't know. I'm not an expert, and neither are you, which is why your bold statements bother me, because I know I'm an expert. And so you shouldn't be making these declarative statements.
I did see one. Where an individual said, I support Ukraine, and I had my initial reaction of like, oh boy, here goes another profile picture and blah blah blah, and then I just glanced at the caption, which is important. I mean, Rachel, I can't even tell you how many times people just see something and then comment without
clearly
reading
you
the
didn't
caption.
read anything.
And they're like, I can't believe you'd say this. You're like, well, if you read the caption, we were actually saying the opposite, but you didn't even take 5 seconds to read the caption. And so we're so reactive as people. And so I was like, oh, here we go. And then I just read the caption. I'm like, oh, they took their whole family when the war started, moved to Poland, and were there for a long time helping refugees. Like they were in the middle of it. Day in, day out, as a family, working, serving, loving these people. All these personal stories they're sharing, this whole thing. Like they upended their whole life to go over there and help. I'm like, okay, they've earned an opinion at least around that thing, right? Of being in Poland, helping refugees. Great. That still doesn't put them in the government buildings in Kiev, knowing what's going on, right? And so to opine about those things would be silly unless you were in there and in those meetings and you heard it all, and then you wouldn't be talking publicly about it because that doesn't happen. Right. And that's why the public doesn't know what's going on. And so, when they turn on the cameras, we get the performance, but we don't get the conversations that happened cameras off before or after. And this is true with media today. There are lots of arrangements that we don't know about that happen beforehand or after. And we see, because what is it that gets viral attention?
The drama.
And so there will be, fighters, UFC kind of fighters or boxers or whatever, or actors, actresses, or whatever. They will agree beforehand, hey, when the cameras roll, let's get into a fight, because that gets views. And so then, and they realize that, that's what gets the views. And so, beforehand, they're hugging, laughing, they're buddies, like whatever. Camera rolls, they're full competitors, and they start fighting and slapping each other, throwing punches, on camera, like we're worst enemies ever. It's because they both make millions because of that. Like they're behind the scenes like, dude, we're going to kill it, bro. We'll get yachts and name them after each other because we're going to make so much money. And then they walk out on camera and put on the fight. Right. And everyone's like, that was terrible. What a horrible fight. You're like, it was all theatrics.
And that's not to say that that's what happened.
No, I don't know what happened.
Scenario, we don't know. But what we do believe is that each of them, everyone involved has some sort of agenda. Each of them is trying to accomplish something, right? Zelensky's trying to accomplish something. Trump is trying to accomplish something. That's what comes out. But we don't understand all of the nuances behind what they're trying to accomplish that leads to that disagreement, right? And so, it's difficult for us to judge the entire situation from a 30-second argument. And to think, going back to the main point, to think that we understand just because of that, just because of what happens there, it's like if someone happened
Even
to
30-minute
you
argument.
Disciplining your child and bases your entire character off of that
1 moment.
30-second discipline, right? Like, you don't know what led up to that, and you don't know what happened after. So you can't judge that person or the whole scenario based off of just that one thing.
Like somebody one time said, you can't take one family photograph and tell the whole family story.
Right.
How silly would that be? And so, you're right. So we watch a little 30-second clip and we get all fired up, and then we watch the full 30 minutes and we think we understand it. But unless you've been digging for 30 years, you probably don't know what you're talking about.
Well, I was thinking about this the other day too, because my aunt shared a link with me to a YouTube video that is my family movies, my old home movies. Like, I was 4 and 7. And I thought how fascinating and interesting it is to have this moment in time captured, on tape.
One of those gigantic video recorders.
Yeah, a giant video recorder. But here it is, it was on a videotape first, and now it's on the internet. But, and my dad, who's passed away, is in there. He's behind the scenes. He's talking. But if someone, and I'm not saying there was anything bad in there that they could judge him off, but say there was something in there that where maybe he got after the kids or yelled at them or this or that or the other, and they judge his entire character off of that, that's not fair. It's just a moment in time that's impacted by so many different factors. We can't judge everything off of that.
Yeah, it's really interesting because unless we've had experience being responsible for much bigger things, it's hard to even begin to wrap your head around it.
Right.
And I've experienced this all the time. I still experience it. I don't personally know what it's like to have 100 employees because I've never had 100 employees. In fact, I've never had 10. Well, no, we've probably had that. But 100 employees, right? I have no idea what it's like to be the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar business. I can't even begin to wrap my head around that level of responsibility. So it'd be really silly of me to try to have an opinion about and pass judgment on somebody who's in that spot doing those things. Like, I don't even get it. But to go to nations and wars
and not knowing or understanding anything about Eastern European history or politics or government or NATO
or even trying to understand the position that the United States plays on the world as a whole right now.
Exactly.
Like, we might think, well, yeah, I get this. Like, really? Like, do you really get what it means to be in that spot and make those decisions? I don't think anyone who hasn't been there can possibly wrap their head around it, because the conversations that are going behind closed doors, the decisions that are being made for secret missions that are being run, for military stuff, for intelligence stuff, I mean, all the intel that's never going to make it out to the public, that's happening 24/7 down there about like the assassinations and technology and hacking. There's so much going on. We're clueless. And I keep thinking like, and these are like good people. I'm not throwing people under the bus, but most good people have a hard time understanding what's going on in their own home.
Or their own head.
Yeah. They don't even understand their own psychology. They're struggling with their own lives, their own habits.
They can't even imagine their house.
This is where I'm going to get ranting
or
here.
Or their family.
Or their body. They can't even manage to keep off that extra 20 or 40 pounds, but man, they've got every opinion about what should be happening in the White House. Like, how about you get clear about what's happening in your house, starting with your own body? You can't even keep yourself from overeating the Oreos. And you know what should be done with international policy? You know what I'm saying? I'm like, come on. You can't even get your kids to cooperate and get along. Listen, you have like zero influence your kids, and you're like, oh, I know what I would tell Trump or Zelensky. Like,
Well, one of the funny things I did say about that was, and again, on the other side, I could see this perspective, was essentially it was like Trump trying to discipline his entitled teenager who just, hey, more handouts, please. I need more. I need more. I need more. That's a perspective that I could see as being valid, you know? And so here we have this little scuffle in the Oval Office. It's like a dad disciplining his son, you know?
Yeah, that's one perspective. I saw a meme somebody made that they put their heads on like on a jujitsu wrestling move. He had him like in a leg bar.
Who was in the leg bar?
Trump had Zelensky in a leg bar. Like, I'll teach you. But it's like we don't know. We don't know what's going on. And while I do agree, Rachel, I both agree, and that's why we talk about with our kids and we talk about with each other. While I do agree, we need to be aware. We need to inform ourselves, fully knowing that even if we just absolutely dug in to try to inform ourselves, it would at best be scratching the surface.
Yeah, exactly.
You couldn't possibly understand it without dedicating your life to it.
Mm-hmm.
So we can dig in a little bit. We should understand what's happening around the world. We should try to understand global consequences. We should be aware of those things. It's important, but not near as important as your family.
Yes,
and
exactly.
Your health and your wealth and your habits and your happiness. And when I get to meet with people every single day, all the time, I'm constantly meeting with people, talking to people. Most people have dysfunctional families.
Mm-hmm.
Most people are struggling just to have the things that they want in their own life. Simple things. So we honestly should focus on that.
Right.
We should get obsessed about our lives. So to listener, get obsessed about your life. Obsess over it. Like the quality of your life you want. You may have an extraordinary marriage, extraordinary relationship with your kids, phenomenal health, great wealth. Run your kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
Be the king and the queen there. And yet, ironically and tragically, we're so caught up in the news. We're so caught up in what's going on in other places where we have zero influence.
Mm-hmm.
There isn't a single thing I can do to influence the cleaning lady in the White House. Like, there's nothing I can do about what's happening in the White House. So I need to focus on what's happening in my house.
Exactly.
And get that in order and start with my own head, my own spirit, my own body, and work on my little kingdom, because that's how I can have a positive impact on the world and those around me. But rant and rave and you're all fired up and silly about what other people should do in other nations, like, come on.
Yeah, well, because that really is the only place we can have an influence.
Yeah.
And I truly believe, and we say this all the time, but I want to keep saying it, that is the only way to actually make a change in the world. Because we don't have impact, influence in any of those other areas, but by changing ourselves and changing our families, we can spread that positive impact to our communities, to our cities, our towns, our countries eventually. Like it seems so small and insignificant and like inconsequential, but really that's the only way it will ever actually work. We have to have stronger individuals and stronger families if we ever want to have a stronger world. There's just no other way. So we have to turn inward. We have to focus our efforts inward and then spreading it outward
to the families around
to our immediate circle of influence. Right. And that's what will change the world, because we can't do it another way.
Right.
Let them worry about it. Let them handle it, and let's live our lives.
And we can, like, obviously right now we're doing this by having a podcast, by having a social media platform. We're trying to spread good ideas and love and good
unity
habits.
Is opposed to divisiveness.
Yeah, I would love for all of us to be able to disagree, have completely different perspectives, and still be united.
Right.
And not just as a country, but as humanity.
Right. But that happens more with this curious approach as opposed to bold certainty about this is how it is. This is what's happening.
So black and white.
Let's more questions and say, well, what about this? And the irony to me is that the people who are so certain about it are also the ones that refuse to really study the other side. They don't want to. Even they've said they have, but I'm like, you haven't, because if you did, you would be saying different things. Not that you would necessarily convert to that side, but you would be able to articulate the other side's opinion just as strongly as you can articulate yours.
Yeah, you got a comment maybe today or yesterday, was just like, I'm so disappointed to see you have this opinion. And the irony is that wasn't your opinion.
Right. The irony was, it was a post I made on Facebook sharing
opposing views.
With opposing viewpoints.
Opposite sides. And without even reading it, so it's like, I'm so disappointed in you. And I bring that up only to say that we get so reactive. And so let's say I have a friend that he said, he just pops up and one day is like, I think this. It would be ridiculous of me to immediately think, I'm so disappointed in you that you have a different opinion. Like, how silly.
Yeah. I
should be like, bro, that's really interesting. Tell me about that. Like, walk me through that. Why would you think that? Because, I've actually had the opposite opinion. So I'm really curious. What would, you're a decent guy. You're a smart guy. Like, walk me through that.
Yeah. How you came to that conclusion.
Yeah. Why are you on that side? Like, give me all of it. And I can hear it all. And then maybe at the end, I either understand him and it strengthens my view, or maybe we agree to disagree. Well, at least I understand you. And we can talk through that.
Or maybe he converts you. But you're like, oh, yeah, I never considered
he has his argument. I'm like, that's amazing. It's new information. Information I didn't have before. So I should change my opinion if I get new information. But for me to just be like, I'm so disappointed in you for having that opinion. Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
We've got to be more intelligent.
Yeah. And
capable of understanding things and thinking through things. Like, it's what's interesting is like, maybe friends may be strong words, but people we've associated with, met and connected with all over the world, and just had great time traveling together, great conversations, great memories. And then an event happens. And we're polarized. And then in the comments on social media, we're attacking each other. It's like, how silly. How dumb. Like, no, we're friends here. Can we have different opinions and talk about it in a civil way? But I guess not. Even the White House, they can't handle civilly. But let's set a better example for our children. Yeah. And being more educated, more open, more civil, more thoughtful, and slower to jump to these rash black and white opinions. And I'm saying this from experience. So I was like that, man. I was Mr. Black and White. And I was bold about, this is the way it is. I remember I was 20. This was before I met you. I was 21. I just had some really strong opinions. And I asked this gentleman that I respected about his opinion of what I had said. And he just simply said, he's like, things aren't always as black and white as you might think. That's all he said to me. And I remember that. I always remember that. That's all he said. There's nothing profound there, nothing crazy. And that was all the feedback. I'm like, no, I want some feedback. I want your opinion.
You to confirm.
Yeah, come on, man. And he's like, things aren't always as black and white as you think. It's interesting. And initially I thought, oh, it's a cop out. I have an opinion, man. But he had a lot more life experience to realize, hey, it's not, there's more to it.
Yeah.
Which is really wise, actually. There's a lot more to it. So anyways, that's.
Well, and I think for me, that's the point I want to emphasize. You and I love to talk about the labyrinth. I think it's all connected. I wish you could see the vision of the labyrinth, but it's this entire circle of, now it represents truth for me. But when you walk the labyrinth to reach the center, which is where truth is, you have to walk all four quadrants. You have to go through all four of them in order to get to the center. And at some point on that journey, you're going to be
in opposing places. You have to be.
But that's actually how you become fully developed. I mean, that's what that means. Fully developed means you've developed all parts of yourself. I also connect this to the yin and the yang, to both hemispheres of our brain. Like, it's all connected. In order to have your brain fully developed, in order to be balanced, which is what yin and yang represents ultimately, you have to have all viewpoints, all perspectives, all information. And too many people will start the journey of the labyrinth, and we see this so often, and they move from where they were to a new position. They're like, oh my gosh, this is the truth. That was false back.
They set up camp.
And they set up camp and they stay there for the rest of their lives.
Yep.
When that's not how the journey's supposed to work. You're actually supposed to keep going. And I found that as I keep going on that journey, sometimes I'll come back to some original perspectives and be like, okay, I've now walked the entire labyrinth and saw where and how this is wrong, but also now how it can also be right while it's also wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it sounds confusing, but like that's how it works.
It's a journey.
That's the journey. And so ultimately, I guess our invitation here is like, keep walking the labyrinth. Keep developing both parts of your brain, left and right hemisphere, which is also directly connected to why there is a left and a right politically. It represents both sides of the hemisphere. We have to have both sides. Otherwise, you literally have half a brain. So if you are on the left and you're like, we're so right, well, you're only half the brain. And if you're on the right and you're like, we are so right, you're only half the brain. You have to have the whole brain, which means you need both sides. You need both viewpoints, both opinions, both. But you have to learn how to work together, or else you literally are just operating with half a brain.
Understand each other.
Yeah.
And think through bigger issues.
Right.
And realize, hey, we both might be wrong together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, right.
And we both might be right together.
Yeah.
This is something I think we would all be very wise to try to articulate and model for our kids, so our children grow up without being in one spot, converted to this little corner of the labyrinth because it's right. And yeah, it is in that corner. But then when you go to there's no corner on a circle, in that quadrant. But if you keep going around, you get over and you're like, wow, this is right. And you keep going around. This is right too.
Yeah.
And you keep going, and then you have the outer rings and the inner, you go all the way in.
Be right.
And then go all the way out again. And you realize there's so many different ways to see this. And I love this because the goal of the labyrinth is to get to the center, but from every spot in the labyrinth, you have a different perspective of center.
Exactly.
And you keep moving. And when you're there and you look towards center, you see what you see, and it's accurate and it's real. And it's true. And then you move a little bit, and guess what? That perspective is as well.
It's like the old story of the old man and the blind man and the elephant. You know, there were 6 blind men, and they go up to the elephant and they say, oh, describe the elephant. What is it like? Well, the elephant's like a wall. No, the elephant's like a rope. No, the elephant's like a snake. No, it's like a big
tree trunk.
They're all right.
Yeah.
They're just standing in different places.
Right.
And I think that too often, especially in the political scene, that's exactly what's happening. It's the blind leading the blind, and they're all touching a different part of the elephant.
And they're all fighting each other because how could you know? Because this is my experience. Good lesson for all of us, remember. Okay, love you guys. Thanks for listening. Have a wonderful day. Love on your family. Love on yourself.
Focus on what you can control.
Get your house in order, starting with getting yourself in order. I know for me, that was a humbling moment, and still is a humbling moment, where I think, how dare I opine about things outside of me when the things inside of me aren't yet in order. And so I can always come back and work on myself harder than I do on anything else. And then I can work on my family. And if my relationships aren't phenomenal, my health isn't phenomenal, if my wealth isn't phenomenal, in some respects, I have no business being outside of my circle. Because I better, I get right back in there. You try to sneak out again. You try to get out and mess around with the neighbors or the community that you got your hands out and all kinds of other stuff. Get your butt back in your own circle and get things right there. You have no business being out there. In fact, I feel very adamant about that.
Yeah.
If moms and dads, husbands and wives, if things aren't amazing at home, you have no business being anywhere else trying to fix things. Get your butt back home and fix your family, fix your home, get things right. And then when things are right there and you figure out systems and strategies to keep them right consistently, and you've got the results to prove it, then what's awesome is you just become like a power couple and a power family that then together you can have so much positive impact on those around you in the outside world. But to go out and do it otherwise is out of order and causes destruction of the family. I literally hear that every
ultimately
day.
Destruction of society.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what happened.
Right.
That's exactly how it occurs.
Which is easy to play out, because what happens is the husband or the wife goes out, and we hear this story every day. I'm sure those of you listening hear the story every day. They go out and eventually it creates divorce. Right. So I heard another sad story yesterday. This couple was so committed to succeeding financially, and they set 5-year financial goals. Within 2 years, they were divorced. Right. They were so committed to their finances, they destroyed their marriage.
Neglect
their
marriage.
So then a marriage breaks up and the kids break up. Boom. So that's one little element of society, but that happens now at a level of around 50%
or higher.
And now you have all of these single parent homes, predominantly fatherless homes, and talk about, the ripple effect, and unintended consequences.
Especially for simple statistics, like most of the people in prison came from fatherless homes.
Right. And that's exactly where I was going. The statistical numbers of negative outcomes, prison is just one of them. It was a long list, and the common denominator was fatherless.
Yeah.
And if I remember right, what I read is it's roughly 40% of children being born in the U.S. are born to fatherless homes. So now it's a societal problem.
Right.
So problems in the home have become societal problems with massive unintended consequences. And that can all be traced back to simple ideas of like, well, yeah, we should do this thing and do that and whatever. And I have this right to do whatever I want. And you should just do what you think is best, without even thinking how this could play out in massive ways.
Well, and I to kind of bring up a separate topic, but I think it's very related. I think ultimately the whole discussion about abortion is really related to that. We're talking about the surface level issue when the root of the problem is something much deeper, which ultimately stems from broken families. Like if we had fewer broken families, we'd have fewer needs for abortion and fewer needs for, this whole conversation that's going on. It's like, let's get back and fix the root of the problem, and that will almost take care of itself in a way. So anyways.
Ooh, so many related issues to that that are kind of interconnected. You start studying and observing all these patterns, societal patterns. They all kind of fit back together like a complicated web. And you see all the strings connecting and realize, oh, there's some correlation here, sometimes causation, but really it comes back to, well, what can I do about it? How am I contributing to the problem? Well, it's by not taking care of myself and those in my own home and family.
Right.
So that's where we have to do our most important work. And you've heard that before, but are you doing it? You say that your relationship with God and your spouse and your kids are the most important things in your life, but are you acting accordingly? Some of you give more energy and passion and time and resources to social media and arguing than you do to your own kids and your own health. In fact, just do that one thing. Take the energy, passion, and time you give to social media and put it into getting in shape. Watch what happens. The average adult is spending 90 minutes a day on social media. You spend 90 minutes a day in the gym? Dang!
Well,
get some results.
Some people might just sit in the gym, selfies, and be like,
exactly.
You're not going
to post it
that way.
They go set up their towel, everything.
Yeah.
You take that shot and then head home. And they're like, I went to the gym. I'm like, yes, you did, and it shows. But yeah, putting it into the things that actually make a difference is so important, so powerful. All right, love you guys. Have a wonderful day. Reach upward.